Raise our hands to Father Yahweh. Heavenly Father Yahweh, this is Kohananiah Hawkins humbly coming before you in prayer as seed of the witness Israel through Yahshua Messiah, our high priest, together with the men of your house gathered here together on what we expect to be the new moon tonight. Father Yahweh, for this law class preceding the weekly Sabbath, your weekly Sabbath, Father Yahweh, which you've set for us for our instruction and reestablishment within your house, as it were, for the rest of the week, the Sabbath, to help us to be prepared for our daily situations, daily problems, daily challenges and opportunities. We ask that all things be done to your glory and honor, decently and in order, and that you'd put your laws within our hearts and in our minds, so that we will ever be ready to use these for all righteous work. And we ask these things through Israel, through Yahshua Messiah. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. And please be seated. Tonight we'll be in the 10th book of Israel, part 2, and chapter 20. Starting on page 199. The title of this is, well, let's see. The title of this is The Two Witnesses. Famous prophecies that scholars have struggled over for centuries. Who is this man? So who is this man? Who are the witnesses, and who are the spokesmen, right? So who is this man? Number 11. So number 11 in the series, right? The kingdom of Yahweh will take over all the earth and the universe. So when is the kingdom of Yahweh going to take over all the earth and the universe? And of course we see in these next words, starting with the promotion of the house of Yahweh. So starting with the promotion of the house of Yahweh, how? Or by or through what? Well, with the message of the kingdom of Yahweh. So let's go over that again. Chapter 20. The two witnesses. Famous prophecies that scholars have struggled over for centuries. Who is this man? Number 11. The kingdom of Yahweh will take over all the earth and the universe, starting with the promotion of the house of Yahweh with the message of the kingdom of Yahweh. And of course this sermon was brought out on 11/13/2010. Starting with verse 3 on page 199. And they say that the global water shortage looms. And of course we see this even more true, as it were, even more real to the world since this sermon was brought out. The World Bank reports that 80 countries now have water shortages. 80 countries now have water shortages. That's what it says, 80, that threaten health and economics. Does threaten economies, but it says and economics. While 40% of the world, that's almost half the world, 40%. 4 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 4 out of 10, right? That's 40%. So more than 2 billion people have no access to clean water or sanitation. If you don't have access to clean water, how are you going to have sanitation? That could be solved easily enough, meaning the not having access to clean water, not having access to sanitation. That could be solved easily enough. But how? Well, as Israel says in this next sentence, I can see many ways that it can be solved. That it could be solved. It would take the peaceful solution character education program for a few minutes to point it out, but it can be solved. Now, some of the ways in which it can be solved, and we know because we use it more ways than one, for clean water, even if it's clean water for cleaning our hands and feet, right? We add some we make lye water out of it by adding either lye water to other water or adding ashes to water in order to leach out the lye. And that actually makes that water clean for certain purposes. Some will tell you that if you drink that ash water, it alkalizes the body. It helps to alkalize the body, and some would make the claim that no disease can live within an alkaline condition. No disease, no parasites. And others will tell you that, well, some parasites can live in alkaline. Yes, but they can't live their entire life cycle in an alkaline condition. So when we add ashes to the water, we're helping to purify that water and helping to have that water purify us. Now, that very thing there can also be used for sanitation purposes. You think about it. We could go into any village in the world and show them how to use ashes and ash water to clean up their water and for sanitation purposes. So they actually could use a little bit of that. It wouldn't necessarily be the whole of it, you know. Sometimes you have to actually filter out the trash particles out of water. And that obviously can be done rather simply. So and any one of us could bring that out in a peaceful solution class given to those who don't know, and all of a sudden, if the people would listen, in several minutes of instruction, they would know how to do certain things to solve these problems. They may not understand the why of it, if we don't explain it. They might not choose to do it, but they could know what to do, which if they would do it, it would help bring peace in their life and the life of others. Because it is a lot more peaceful when you can actually drink the water. You think about it, how many of us have heard quite a few stories in the past about whether Europe or elsewhere, I'm talking about in the past, where you didn't drink the water because you're subject to getting sick, but it's okay, you could drink wine all day long in France or wherever else. We don't recommend it. Don't drink the wine, right? Don't drink the beer or the alcohol right now. We don't need it right now. After the kingdom's established, or whenever else it is that Israel says we should go back to it, then we can. And right now, we won't be bringing peace into our life or anyone else's life if we're out there drinking beer, wine, or other alcohol. And why do I mention that? Because I mentioned water, and I gave an example of why these other things were used. But don't go back into drinking beer, wine, or alcohol for thinking that you're doing right when Israel made it real clear that for right now, let's leave that alone. Beer, wine, alcohol in our as drink, we don't need it. We don't need it because we don't need any level of sin or inclination to sin that follows when that's not handled properly. And don't make the excuse of, oh, well, I can handle it. Verse 5, well, there might be that too. Growing pressure on water supplies affecting 1 in 5 global businesses. Now you think about it. Of course, shortages of water very much affect business. Whether one has a car wash, a restaurant, a soda manufacturing or bottling plant, other food preparations. I'm sure you could probably think of many things that need water in their production. I'm sure I could, and I haven't given it the thought right now to comment upon it, reasonably. Now, if you turn to page 200, verse 16, it's talking about Florida and the state of Florida. Officials planning to euthanize 400 pigs. It says now they've had these pigs in custody since 2005. I won't say about, well, who's holding who in custody. I don't know if the pigs are forcing the humans or the humans are forcing the pigs, but anyway, I don't want to go too much into that. It's not our objective to disrespect the authorities. But I just find it interesting how it's mentioning about now they've had these pigs in custody since 2005. And it says the state officials are planning to euthanize about 400 pigs who have been quarantined for infectious disease at an animal sanctuary since 2005. A spokesman for the Florida Department of Agriculture says there is concerned the pigs may have an infectious disease caused by bacteria that can be transmitted to people. They're suspicious of it. I guess they're suspicious of it, so they had these pigs arrested or whatever, right? They're in custody anyway. Now it is 2010, brethren. They have the best scientists in the world, the best that the world could train. They've been training for 6,000 years. I guess some of them trained for the Olympics too. I don't know. Maybe that wasn't scientists, but and they're holding these, and now they're still suspecting that something is wrong. They're going to kill the pigs. Well, that makes about as much sense as some of the other things, the issues that we see taking place in the world. You know, how come they just don't employ these pigs for the way Yahweh had in mind? Let them go clean up the filth of the earth. They really do have a job. Breakfast table is not one of them, except if they're eating what's thrown out from breakfast. They don't know how to solve a simple problem. Just a little bitty simple problem. Right. So the simple problem that could have been solved is clean water and sanitation. And if the scientist was telling these people, look, use charcoal, but if you don't remember, we've been taught in the House of Yahweh a little bit about the value of charcoal. And charcoal absorbs a lot of toxins, a lot of poisons. There are those who will tell you. Well, in fact, I remember growing up, we were taught a little bit in health class and in first aid. If someone drinks certain things that are not to be vomited back up, like gasoline or benzene, or I don't really remember what else, you don't have them vomit it up because it'll burn the esophagus. So what do? You give them some charcoal. That's what they taught us. You give them some charcoal. Why? Well, because the charcoal will, and I'm not telling you to do this. I mean, after all, use the information that the world gives you. That's what you need when you're going to solve their problems, you see. Now, if you want health, I don't know, you might consider Yahweh, but I wouldn't want to tell you to, any way to solve any problem that the authorities, are going to turn to us and say, oh, we told you, we gave you medical advice. No, use the doctors. And take the problems along with it, and look, you have to look through what I'm saying to get to the bottom. See, Yahweh has simple answers. And I remember one of the brothers who probably here tonight, if not, he'll be here a little later tonight, I would think, who told me that in the country he's from, one of the islands out in the Caribbean, he remembers his grandparents taking charcoal and just tossing some of it into a bucket of water that needed to be cleaned up. They didn't even bother to filter the water through it. And that would absorb what needed to be absorbed. Now, I don't know if that's quite adequate. Probably is, but I don't know. But taking water and pouring it through charcoal, a lot of toxins, a lot of pollutants are pulled right out because charcoal is very effective. Now, how long did the scientists have to work to come up with the concept of charcoal? I don't know the answer. Maybe they just visited a fire that somebody made. But Yahweh knew what we need. And we've had charcoal around, I'd have to suspect, since about the time Adam started making fires. And maybe there were fires going before that. There might have been lightning or something, right? Even before Adam started the first fire. Maybe he saw one, already burning. He might have seen charcoal before he started the first fire. But you should look to how simple the solutions are when you use something simply like ashes and charcoal. But the scientists wait. They can quarantine these pigs, arrest them. I don't know where they put the handcuffs on a feet or the leg, the hand. I don't know where the pig's hands are. I don't know if they're the ones in the front or in the back. Maybe they just shackle them up. I know it's ridiculous, and of course that's not how they did it, but it's about as ridiculous as what they did. Which is that, under Yahweh's laws, there's certain times when a sick animal just needs to be taken care of. It's not by putting them on the dinner table. And the animals need to be able to do that which is beneficial for themselves, and they need to be able to go out and do the job that they were hired for. Not that man hired them for, the one that Yahweh assigned them. Okay, verse 17 on page 200, 10th book of Israel, part 2. And they're holding these now, these pigs. Still suspecting something is wrong, they're going to kill the pigs. Well, that makes about as much sense as some of the other things, the issues we see taking place in the world. We ought to look at these problems. Can you imagine? Here's a suggestion to solve the economic problems, because there are some economic scientists out there. They're probably about as smart as these scientists here, by the way. Now, you got these problems. All these countries are in debt. All these people are in debt. Of course, they're using worthless money, and they got them into worthless debt so they could steal the wealth. Now, you really want to solve the problem? Well, why don't you just cancel all the debts? All of them. Let the people have their homes. Just cancel it. Now, would some people lose? You bet. The ones who allowed others to go into debt. The bankers would be really big losers. But of course, Yahweh's got a better way, because they're not gonna do that, I don't think. So they're going to have to come here and let Yahweh cancel their debts, by certain debts, by way of they can confess when they're ready to repent. They can repent and confess, and certain of those debts can be put away. The sins. That's right. And that actually, when they get to the point where they don't go around offering at interest to the brothers, to their brethren, there won't be that same incentive for them to be lending money and running people into deep debt. Verse 18. They don't know how to solve a simple problem. Just a little bitty, simple problem. They don't know how to go back and trace it to its source. So they can't look at a problem and logically, by the way, logic. There's a plan, like Yahweh's plan, right? No, they can't logically, they can't go back and trace it to its source. And of course, they won't use the scriptures which tell them these relationships that they're creating between man and beast, that these are going to get them in trouble. I should have covered here in verse 4, I don't think I did. That the few minutes, I did, but maybe not in quite the right way, didn't make the point. Solving problems, there are those who will tell you that if it's complex, if the solution to the problem is complex, it's probably not the solution. It needs to be made very simple. It may need to be broken down to a simpler form. Sometimes, people come up with these convoluted problems that, this problem the solution might be as simple as, and somebody tells you an hour of problems. Wait, here's the solution. Go see your counselors and ask them what you should do. Really. So, but the solution to the problems take a few minutes to point out. When it's the peaceful solution, it's like, want to solve the problem of the war in Afghanistan or anywhere else? Well, why don't we just have them ask for their answer at Abel? They present the basic problem or problems that they're dealing with. Ask at Abel, And then we'll just give them an answer. And we'll see how many more rounds of artillery or whatever they should be shooting at one another. I don't think it would be too many. Probably not one. That would be my guess. We'll just tell them, listen, let's see where the problems are. Let's see what can be done. Why don't you just seek the habitation of your heavenly Father and that place go? Why don't you just go to Abelin? I'll bet that would solve the problem. If you started walking right now to Abelin and you wait till the Sabbath's over and you don't turn from there, you might have a pretty long route to go from Afghanistan, and figure a way across there from Russia over to Alaska. But if you just start walking now, I'll bet you wouldn't have so much time and energy for fighting one another. And that would solve the problem. Or get on an airplane. You can figure out how to get a visa, and all that. But if you start walking, by the time you get past through Russia, you probably won't need a visa anymore. So there you go. You have that problem solved. Don't even have to pay it. Do you know that for as far as I know, in all countries, somebody wants to come to the United States, they want a visa, there's $200, or I think it's $250, application fee, $250 US to apply to the U.S. embassy or consulate in that foreign country to come here, whether they grant your visa or not. Now that, I'm sure, is really peaceful, right? Can you imagine some of these countries, of which I've dealt with some of the people, where the per capita income is somewhere around $250 a year, right? And for them to try to get a visa to come here, just to apply, $250. That doesn't count any photocopies or bank fees that may be involved because they got to pay it a certain way. It doesn't count any passport photos or getting a passport. None of that stuff. Anyway, let's go on to page 201, verse 25. Quoting here from the book of Israel, Isaiah 2:2. He shows concerning Yada and Jerusalem, Isaiah 2:2. It will come to pass in the last days that the mountain, promotion of the house of Yahweh, will be established in the chief of the nations. So there's going to be a promotion take place, an advertisement take place. Notice an advertisement. I find that very interesting because many of us have thought, and it is correct, that the house of Yahweh would be promoted above all other congregations. It's going to be raised up, yes. But some of that raising is us promoting it. Flyers going out, telling someone else about the house of Yahweh, doing the work that helps bring it to the house of Yahweh to the attention of others. So there's going to be a promotion take place, an advertisement take place. By the way, you look at that word advertisement, right? And you see right in there the V-E-R-T, advert, V-E-R-T. And V-E-R-T, if you look at the word vertical, what's vertical? Upright. Yes? Upright. And AD, in Latin, it takes a number of forms, but it means to, toward, near, at. So to, toward, near, at, turning upright. So you can be sure that actually the right and proper use of advertisement is towards turning ones to righteousness. That's the proper use. And if but the Latin word for there that I didn't tell you that, but it's vertere, which means to turn. And if you look up convert, you'll see that these words are related. Convert. There's a number of other words, but revert would still be the vertere, is to turn. Now, if you take it just a little further, the first three letters of that V-E-R-T is V-E-R, which is a shortened form of the Latin veritas, which means truth. So even a short, so you have to get to the truth before you can be turned. V-E-R-T-E-R-E, for tearing. I may have lost you there, but I'm just going to... It's interesting how words have a great meaning, and in Yahweh's plan, you can... If you really want to understand English words, I'll tell you, if you're really studying them and breaking apart, look at them with the view of you're standing or sitting, you're in the sanctuary, the house of Yahweh. Now, how does that word apply? And you'll find it pretty amazing. It really puts quite a different sense of words when you do it that way. So there's going to be a promotion take place, an advertisement take place. Publications take place, as was shown with one of the scriptures. But the judgments are actually going to be published. He said, talking about Isaiah, that was the prophecy. Well, those judgments are being published at this time throughout the world. One of them is the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program that publishes Yahweh's judgments and shows the correct way to peace. The only way you can keep it from working in your life is just refuse to use it, which many have. And of course, that's the reason we see the confusion throughout the world that we're seeing today. Verse 32, Micah 3:1. Then he said, "Hear now, O heads of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel, is it not for you to know justice?" Down to verse 35, speaking of Micaiah verse 2. "You who hate righteousness." Well, at this time, of course, we see a hatred for righteousness throughout the world. And when a root of bitterness gets into a person, they start hating righteousness, even after they've been here for many years, and love evil, these people. Yes, so even those of us who have been here many years, we better make sure we don't allow a root of bitterness in us, because it will grow if we don't watch it. If we allow it, and we don't put it out instantly, if we allow that root to take hold, it'll get us. Verse 36, so quoting verse 2, "You who hate righteousness and love evil." Well, this was not just for these people at that time. Yahweh shows in the prophecies concerning the same thing here, that it would be in the world, in the last days, worse than ever before. So the worst. So when you see the prophets speaking to Yada and Jerusalem, they're speaking to the 12 tribes that are shown in Genesis 49, saying in the very first verse, Genesis 49:1, this is going to be in the last days. And this teaching that has come down through these generations is going to be for the last days also, but worse than ever before, to where the water supply can actually be shut off from a nation. So notice there is a hatred for righteousness in this world. Now you think about it. You think about it. When the 10 Commandments were posted throughout public buildings and in schools, etc., then there wasn't the same level of hatred for those 10 Commandments. So for at least a part of Yahweh's law, there wasn't that hatred. But now, there is a great hatred for it. But of course, in the time of this greatest hatred, there'll be the time of the greatest love shown by Yahweh's people. So if you would, please stand for the great Kahan Eliah. Please welcome.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Speaking of the great peaceful solution to teach Yahweh's laws and judgments to this world, you know, at the time of this sermon, I remember the sermon very well. It was given the 13th of November, and that was the time that we were preparing that Sabbath to go to Washington, D.C., because the World Conference on Peace, held by the Peaceful Solution, was held the 16th of that November. And that was the Sabbath we were preparing after that sermon to go, to sound the warning to all the nations and to our leaders. which is a continual thing that we must do. It never stops to sound that trumpet to everyone, to all who will listen. Many people today trying to figure out, why are these things taking place? Well, where does the problem lie? In verse 45, Pastor says, "Now, these are the plans, brethren," and that's speaking about what the great Khan and I had been speaking of, and one of the problems they're having right now is the water shortage. The water shortage and the plans they're using to try to fix all of these shortcomings, all of these problems they're suffering from. He says, "Brethren, they're being made to solve the problems." That's to solve the problems, and of course, this is part of their problem. Part of the problem that they have is the method they're using to solve them. You cannot solve a water shortage by doing what they've done in San Diego, by taking the wastewater and turning it back into drinking water. And they did it due to the climate change. Literally serving people their own urine to drink, just as Isaiah said they would do. And it's not just San Diego, but it's moving and it's growing. And they're actually lifting San Diego up as an example for others to follow. Now, these are the people who are supposed to be addressing our problems. Where are the leaders? Where are these so-called religious leaders? Leaders of moral character, where are they? Why are they not standing up to stop the problem if they so desire to fix and help people? Why not? How can a person look at a child 3 to 4 years of age who has leukemia and treat the child and treat the child and treat the child and make as much money as they can out of the child, or the insurance company that's funding the treatment of the child, without having the backbone to stand up and say, this is what's causing the disease. Your sins are leading to the death of these children. That's what Yahweh's house does. That's what Yahweh's priests do and his administration do. We stand up for the causes of the sins, and we tell the people what the cause of the sin is. That's exactly what the last days witness is doing in these last days. To sound the trumpet is to tell the people why their curses are coming. It's not to send out emails blasting Yahweh's last days witness and trying to spread your lies and your gossip and your slander to everyone. No, it's to address the problems, to tell people, if you will stop the sin, if you will stop it today, we can start making this world a better place. But sin has to stop. And it will stop with or without you, I, or anyone else. If we don't stop sinning, eventually we will die, and there will be a group of people, a generation that will sin no more. Yahweh has said so, and it will take place in these last days. Just as surely as Yahweh has said it, it will come to pass. Now, Pastor spoke about when he went to Canada, when he went on a fishing trip after he was actually doing some work up there with the Peaceful Solution and the work of Yahweh. He went on a fishing trip out on the Great Lakes. And he says, coming back to shore after we had caught all these beautiful fish, now notice they were beautiful. They actually looked nice. They looked desirable. They looked like something that could be eaten. He said, we caught quite a few. But coming back into the shore, it said, don't eat the fish. And it had a pollution sign that said, don't eat any more than 4 ounces of this fish because it's contaminated. Now, why would you not stop the businesses that are contaminating the water? We know they're paying a lot of taxes to you, but why would you not figure out something else to do besides destroy the water supply? You know, I don't know if many of you have been to the East Coast. That's where I was raised, and I know some people I see that are from the East Coast. If you've ever been to the coastal lines of North and South Carolina, many millions of people go play out on the beach lines, and they go play in the water, and they have a great time. And they get into the water, and the sand crabs nibble on your toes as you're playing in the water in the ocean. But very few of them actually know that the septics are ran out to the ocean. And there's a skyline shot, actually, of a very popular beach in South Carolina that shows in color the feces, how it actually extends almost a mile off the shoreline. And that's what people are playing in. It's very common for signs to be posted conveniently beside the hotels where you walk onto the beach, because the hotels are out on the beach, they're beachfront, but we're in a little corner over here where you're not going to see it. The most common folk aren't going to see it, telling you not to get into the water because it's contaminated. As they take millions and millions of your tourist dollars because they need you to get out in that water and play around. That's what they need. That's what they want. But where are our leaders? You know, I read an article not long ago that was speaking about a lady, and this is once again pertaining to the problems. The problems, their answers are nothing more than the problems. That's what society is bringing. That's what the House of Yahweh is warning this world about. But I read an article to where Planned Parenthood was apologizing in Chicago, Illinois for the death of a 24-year-old young lady who hemorrhaged to death after receiving an abortion at Planned Parenthood. It amazed me that a place that makes its money off of murder would even care to try to even offer an apology for killing someone. Where's the apology for the 44 billion or million or trillion, who knows the count now, of the babies that have been murdered? As they stick something inside of a body and actually use it as a vacuum cleaner to shred the body of an infant apart. Where's the apologies for that? Where are the religious leaders that should be standing up to that? They're too busy teaching sodomy. That's where they're at. They're too busy supporting the queers, the lesbians. Why can they not stand up and tell people, dying you will die if you go this way? It's not a way of life we can continue in. You know, that's one thing that we should all join completely behind the seventh Malach. If we want to have frustration, if we want to have disgust, we should learn to direct it at the sin that is in our lives first and get it out. And learn to build up Yahweh's house and put everything we have into building Yahweh's house. Many, many people are going to come. Not everyone wants to eat contaminated fish. Not everyone wants to drink their own urine. Not everyone wants to see the death of these children. I dare say that most people would not want to see a child dying from cancer, born with deformities, chest cavities opened, their actual organs on the outside of their bodies when they come out of the womb. These things are from sin. They're not from following Yahweh's laws. Not from following Yahweh's laws at all. You know, one thing was very interesting. Planned Parenthood in 2008 and 2009, their budget was $1.4 billion. That's how much money they used to run their facilities just in the 2008-2009 year. You ever tried to visit Planned Parenthood? I have. You're not welcome, I can tell you that. They don't want you around it. They're only there to execute babies. And if that's planning parenthood, I don't know how you plan parenthood by killing children. I truly don't know. That's the confusion of the body. That's the confusion. I recently seen where someone had put in a statement on the internet, how can a body be so confusing by the mind wanting one thing and the heart wanting another? And I thought that is the ultimate result of sin. That is the ultimate result. When in your own body, you can't even control your thoughts, which lead to those emotions, which help you perform those actions. You know, how do you stop the homosexuality in the Catholic Church? The same way you stop it everywhere else. You teach them how to control their thoughts. How do you stop sin? You teach someone how to control their thoughts. How did Yahshua Messiah bring all things under subjection? He brought everything under his thoughts. He controlled them. He controlled all thoughts. He never let them control him. He was never ruled by emotion. He controlled them, and he taught, and he did his job. Now, looking on to verse 50, it says, "But the waters I'm talking about, now that pollutes the lakes," and this is the Great Lakes where the sign was up saying the fish were contaminated. It goes back into, once again, the Great Lakes. They polluted this water because it carries chemicals out from their plants they've been using in making this material that eventually gets the most expensive part. The most money that is being brought in now is through war. And of course, Bawa Jain explained this to Pastor when Pastor spoke at the UN. And once again, his name meaning gate opener, and he was the one that opened the door for Pastor to come in and speak there. He said it's an $850 billion a year business, and that was back in 2000. So now it's much more than that, trillions of dollars. And once again, you know, it amazes me that anyone would think that peace comes through war. If anything mankind has proven in the 6,000 years of its existence is that peace will never come through war. You would think that someone would understand when you go in and kill a nation, you're killing someone's brother, mother, father, sister, daughter, or friend, and you're messing with a group of people that have not been taught to control their thoughts, and they're going to lead to emotions of hate, and they're going to seek revenge, and they're going to attack you back. But it's always been a common way for the Catholic Church to go in and kill who they so desire, as the Crusades show. And they acknowledge this. They acknowledge the slaughtering of the Jews. They acknowledge the slaughtering of millions of Muslims. They acknowledge all these things. They don't hide it, and they boast about it. Now, once again, Pastor says, well, here's what you see in Revelations 18. And that is leading to, he says, Revelations 18, of course, which has come out from among them so that you do not suffer of their plagues. In other words, do not partake of their ways. Do not act as they act, walk as they walk, or talk as they talk. Come out from amongst them in everything they do. What they eat, the way they conduct themselves. It's very often asked when speaking about the peaceful solution, do you really think this one program out of this small town in Texas is going to make a difference? And I remember telling one senator, no, I don't think it's going to. I know it's going to. And it is. You know, the greatest downfall a person can have in these last days is not to believe. Many, many people have fallen from Yahweh's house because of belief. They don't believe. But that belief comes from, like the great Khan was reading out before, that root of bitterness that sets in, and then they turn from righteousness. They want to justify the sins that they commit, and they want to follow the ways of this world. Because look at the world. You get to go out and do what you want to do. And you can go out and, man, make all that money and live the high life. You know, I see starving people every day in the world, but I've never seen one in the house of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Pastor says, look over to verse 17, for in 1 hour such great riches come to nothing. All of these things they work for, all of these things they lay their lives out for, all of these things that they do and say will come to nothing. If we don't put everything we have into building up the house of Yahweh and to serving in its administration, everything that we put our hands to do will also come to nothing. A business is nothing unless it supports the work of Yahweh. Our lives are absolutely nothing unless we build up the house of Yahweh. Nothing at all. Pastor goes on to say in verse 54, he says, the shortages of water that we're seeing now that I just read you the article on, I think it did this a few years ago when the book was put out saying, you know, under the present rate that the water is being used now by manufacturers, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see war because each country, they just don't want water to drink. They don't want water for their citizens to bathe in. They don't even want water for them to drink. They'll serve them their own urine while they use the fresh water for themselves. What's left of it anyway. But the whole cause, once again, they couldn't care less. They have to fend for their own, speaking of the citizens, what they want Speaking of the leaders, the governments, is the manufacturing water that can produce bombs so they can go nuclear, and everyone wants to go nuclear today because this is where the money is. If you've got a nuclear bomb and you're not using it, you can sure sell it. There's a lot of money made in that. Just like Pastor goes on to say, it's about money. Money, that's what Thanksgiving is all about. And you know, it used to be, I remember growing up, going in the stores. I don't go in stores much anymore. But going into the stores, I remember Thanksgiving being a very big thing. And it was odd to see the Christmas stuff coming out around Thanksgiving because they tried to market both of them at one time and get a little ahead of time. But you go into the stores now, and in August and September, they're marketing Halloween. And it's one of the biggest money makers that there is. And I've always thought, you know, a parent will take their child trick-or-treating, and then they'll wonder why they're bullying someone in school. But yet they're the one that take them up to the door of someone's house and let them threaten someone, if you don't give me something, I'm going to give you a trick that you're not going to like. So give me a treat or I'm going to play a trick. You know, well, where did we go wrong? Well, we went wrong by not following the laws of Yahweh. That's where we go wrong. But the same thing on page 204, the same thing in verse 56 with Christmas. Christmas is a business to make money. But that's not the big business. The big business is producing these toys that contaminate the water. And everybody knows that if there's not enough water to clean the toys, to get the contamination off, well, what else can you do? Children want toys. You got to get the toys out there. They'll clean them off themselves. They'll lick them clean. And then we'll make money off of them when they go to the hospital because of the poisoning they suffer there. And that's what is taking place. It sounds far-fetched, but it's not far-fetched. It's amazing when I remember doing a study for the Peaceful Solution one time. We were putting it together, and in 2005, it was reported money spent by the federal government, $15 billion, to treat STDs. That was what the government paid to treat STDs, $15 billion. Now that's reported. And remember, they're not calling heart disease an STD, which is exactly what it is. They're not calling throat cancer an STD, which is exactly what it is, and they admit to it today, even though Yahweh's Last Days Witness said many years ago that these cancers of the mouth and the cervix and of the other parts, they're nothing more than HPV. And I remember when one of our presidents pushed for this abstinence program, and the children went to another form that they didn't classify as a certain type of relations. And it led to a very rapid growth of throat cancer in teenagers because of HPV spreading to the throats. What was done about it? Nothing. Children dying because of the decisions we make and nothing done. In verse 58 it says, well, the problem is now the population, they say. We need to reduce the population by a few billion people. You know, and that's a great plan. When you treat people, not only do they lead you and teach you to do things where you will die, they make as much money out of you or from you as they can before you die. It's like the most perfect business anyone could ever create to bring money into their system. We're going to tell you that you can do whatever you want to do. If you've ever seen someone die from AIDS, I know there's pictures in the Mark of the Beast Volume 1 when Pastor was warning people of these things years ago. Someone dying from AIDS. It's an horrific sight. Do you think that slows anyone down? No. They don't believe they're going to get something until they've got it. And then they're so angry at the world and everyone else, many of them take on the desire to spread it to as many people as they can before they die. But that's what society has produced. A group of people that have no care for life. And that's what Yahweh has always said we must have. We have to care for life. We have to treat everyone with value. Everyone must be treated with value. But that's not what the world is doing today. It's all about making money. Making money. In verse 69 it says, "It wasn't Yahweh who brought this to pass, brethren. It was their greediness and wanting to control the people." And if you don't think they don't control the people, go look at the greatest success out in the world. You know, I know many people in Abelin who have millions of dollars. And they're in just as much debt as the people who make $50,000. And the richest people are the ones that owe nothing and don't make hardly anything. At least they owe no man nothing. But it looks like it's very desirable to have the 14,000 square foot house with a 5-car garage that sits out on the corner for everyone to see. And that's not exaggeration, that's the house in Abelin. It looks desirable. But what could occur if that money, like the Catholic Church, look at the money they have. I guarantee you they have air conditioning. You know, the House of Yahweh has always put their money in the printing of this literature, putting out the peaceful solution. And every member I've ever talked to said, you know what, I would much rather do the work of Yahweh than have air conditioning. And that's exactly where it goes. Praise Yahweh. But that comes from what Yahweh has taught through His work to His witness to us. To help. It's not to make money, but it's to teach people. It's to want to get this work out. It's to want to help everyone better their lives. And Yahweh is not the one behind it. Yahweh is not this vengeful God, as they like to say, who is setting up in the heavens ready to destroy the first person that does anything wrong. It's not in Yahweh's character to harm anyone. And that's one thing we all must thoroughly understand. Yahweh does not harm anyone. He allows us to make our own choice. And He gives us the freedom to do so. And He says, you can do whatever it is you want to do. But if you do this, you'll die. If you do this, you'll live. And you can have a life of an abundance. You'll be very blessed. You will enjoy life the way I do if you live this way. Or you can go live the other way. As the Catholic Church teaches, you can go live that way, and dying you will die. Do you die immediately? That's the other greatest deception that's been thrown on this world. Actually believing death takes place when you stop breathing. Death takes place when you start sinning. And if you do not repent and convert, it completes itself. Death does not start when your death certificate's filled out, or when you're put in the ground, or when the doctor comes in and pronounces you dead. They should say, I pronounce a success. Because that's exactly what the system brought forth. And it was a complete success. It sure depopulated the earth the way they're wanting to. It's amazing how they wanted to populate the earth, and Yahweh said, be fruitful and multiply. It's a system that is so contrary to what Yahweh has ever said. And that's exactly what we're bringing to this world and these governments and these leaders. Now, in verse 74 it says, now think of what Yahweh has prophesied. Think of that time right here when this was done, and this was speaking of the destruction of the temple, and the plowing of the temple, and the looting of the temple, with Titus actually looting the temple and moving the things to Rome. It was prophesied 710 BCE. Over 700 years later is when this took place. Now the ends of these prophecies ends with another kingdom that is prophesied, which you're a part of right now, learning to be a part of it. This came to pass in detail, every bit of this, and these same evil priests that Yahweh said, because of you, He also shows because of you, speaking of the 12 tribes of Israel and the priests and their schools of higher learning that are bringing this about, He says to them in these last days, you are going to burn. You're going to burn. You're going to bring this upon yourselves. And look over to verse 80. Look what Yahweh's doing. Look at verse 79 first. But Yahweh says, and that's what Pastor's saying, but He says, But in these last days, and of course this is Micaiah chapter 4 and verse 1, but in these last days it will come to pass that the mountain, the promotion of the house of Yahweh, will be established in the chief nation, or in the chief of the nations, and it will be raised above all congregations. That is going to take place as sure as Mount Zion was plowed like a field, and it's going to take place in these last days. And brethren, if we don't believe it, we're going to be found short. We have to believe with every ounce of energy we have, and not believe through words, but believe through works, through actions. And it begins with controlling our thoughts. In verse 80 it says, and peoples will eventually flow to it, and all people will eventually flow to it. And we see that taking place today. Many, many people applying for visas for the feast, and remember those people in your prayers. Because there's many, many people who seek, who they literally fight for funding, and they do unbelievable jobs to try to get enough money just to fly here. And like the great Khan said before me, many of them it's not an option for. It's not an odd thing to talk to someone that lives off $1 US a day. But you know what? They're thankful. And they're joyful. And they can't imagine what it's like to live in a camper or a mobile home. They don't even fathom a house because they live underneath a tree. You know, it's sometimes we take things for granted and we complain about things that other people would not even know where to begin in giving thanks for the things that sometimes we cast aside. Praise Yahweh. But once again, Pastor says, I feel sorry for the people who want to leave Yahweh's righteousness at this time. Remember, Yahweh's righteousness, Yahweh's ways, His laws, as Deuteronomy 6:25 says. They're right on the verge of receiving all of this reward. Their only reward will be with the hypocrites. That's the only reward they got. The fearful and unbelieving will have their part in the lake of fire. And there were people, I remember, around that time that left. And and it's always hard to see people leave. I don't know of anybody in the house of Yahweh that I've ever spoken with that rejoices when someone leaves. You know, I do, and I have seen many people rejoice at the return of people when they truly repent. I've seen that, and I've seen that many times, and I've seen that especially from the administration of the house of Yahweh. You know, many people speak evil of the dignitaries, just as Scripture said they would, but I know there's many people here that would lay down their life and do everything they could to help someone, and never have they ever wanted to lay stumbling blocks in front of anyone. But the people who say those things are the people that try to hide their sins. They don't want people to know what they're actually doing. But it all comes to light. It all comes to light. In verse 89 on page 206 it says, but we, the ones of the house of Yahweh, we of the house of Yahweh, we will walk in the name of Yahweh our Father forever and ever. Well, to walk in His name means we're going to keep His laws, doing what Yahweh says we're going to do in prophecy. Now that means we're going to have to perform an action. We're going to have to control our thoughts and direct our feelings into doing something. If we sit around, show up late for Sabbath services and leave early, maybe come Friday night if we feel like it, and we don't do anything else for the work of Yahweh during the week, what part can we expect in the kingdom of Yahweh? You know, and we should ask ourselves, what is it that we expect Yahweh to allow us to do if we're not willing to do anything ourselves? There's no retirement age in the house of Yahweh to where you can't do something. I mean, there's something for everyone. I see men in wheelchairs serve every Sabbath, and they do it with a joy. You know, I've seen blind people serve. I've seen everybody who's ever desired to do something serve. They did it of their own free will, and they enjoyed it, and they performed it very diligently, and they're great servants, and their names will be mentioned very highly in the kingdom of Yahweh for all the work they've done. You know, and we have to seek to be like Yahweh, to serve like Yahweh. Just like, you know, I don't know if you've ever dealt with pastor and you call him and you need something, and he'll okay, I'll get right back to you. And it's not very long, your phone's ringing, okay, here it is, and he's speaking so fast you're trying to keep up with him. And you know you're not the only phone call that he's dealing with. but he's not slothful about getting the work of Yahweh done at all. And that's how we must become. We must become just like he is. And he has set his mind to become just like Yeshua is. And Yeshua set his mind to become just like Yahweh is. And that's how he is Yahweh to us. Through that chain of wanting to become like his teacher, like his leader. And that's what we must do. If you look over to page 207 in verse 113, it says, he shows, speaking of Yahweh, he shows that he's going to be handed over to the Yadim, or Yeshua. Go back up to verse 112 first. If my kingdom were out of this world, and this Yeshua speaking, he says, then my servants would fight, so that I would not be handed over to the Yadim. But now my kingdom is not from here. No, his kingdom was not of this kingdom. Remember the two systems that were in the beginning, the two trees, the tree of life and the tree of righteousness and evil, the tree of life and the tree of righteousness and evil. Now, handed over to the Yadim, he shows several places, several things here. Now in this verse, in verse 36, he says, he shows that he's going to be handed over to the Yadim, or was, and that the kingdom is not of this world. So he's not having a kingdom here. It's not something in this world at this time that is going to develop at all into something. It's not one of the kingdoms that exist at this time, or that existed at that time, that is going to develop, but a total new one that starts with the promotion of the house of Yahweh. And Zechariah clearly shows that it would be the ends of the earth is where this would take place. And yes, we'll close at this time, but it did start on the ends of the earth, and it did start with a young man named Vernon, who named his brother a year and 8 months old, contrary to popular belief. And Yahweh's house never says anything without having the facts, brother. Praise Yahweh. At this time, if everyone will please stand. Glorious and most honorable Father, whose name is Yahweh. Father, this is your servant, Kahan Eli Haller Hawkins, coming before you with all of our great brethren here in the house of Yahweh, Father. All of us being a seed of the seventh Malach you've sent in these last days, the great Kahan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through the authority of our high priest, Yeshua Messiah. Most righteous fathers, we come before you on this holy Sabbath once again. We thank you for allowing us to be called out of this sin-sick world, Father Yahweh, and to serve you, and for the opportunity you've given unto us to be part of this great administration and this priesthood you have set up and established on this earth, Father. And we do see the destruction that is soon to come. We see the death that is taking place in Syria, Father Yahweh, and we see the speaking of war in Iran, and all of these things going about just as you said they would, and just as the great witness has been warning this world for many years, Father. We do pray for your plan to soon come to pass, and we do pray for all of those who are coming out and you are calling to be allowed to come out of this sin-sick world, Father Yahweh, and that they would be allowed to come to your great house. And we do continually pray for the open doors for all of the men and women and children that are applying for visas to attend your great feast, Father, because we know they're working diligently at that at this time. We pray that the doors would be open for them and that all things would be done for the ushering in of your kingdom. We do continually pray for your great work as it goes forth, and that you would continually open all the doors, Father, that we as servants unto the witness may perform them and walk hand in hand underneath our great teacher and serving you all the days of our lives. And we do ask this once again through the authority of our high priest, being a seed of the seventh Malach. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise you.